Good morning. Well, if you've been watching closely in our church recently, then you've been able to be an eyewitness to the growth in our church. And I don't mean numerically, although that's been going on too. I'm talking about what we've been seeing, the testimony of people in our church going through very difficult circumstances and coming out the other side with their faith, not just intact, but stronger than before. They're able to stand, like it says in Ephesians 6, against the schemes of the devil, and then doing all they can to stand therefore, with an experience that no one can take away from them. We had a Wednesday night service not long ago where there was the opportunity for those to speak about these things happening. And we weren't here because we were sick, but we were watching on the live stream. And it was just an awesome thing because so many of us knew the circumstances of what they had been going through. And to be able to hear them say, how God brought them through it. And you could see the growth that had been obtained through those experiences. And it made me think of the maturing process that we go through as we follow Christ. And right now in our church, we have people who are of all different phases of maturity. And so I want to talk about those today. I think it's a good study, not only so we can appreciate where people are in their walk, but also so we know how to work alongside one another, to edify each other and not to hinder the growth process of another person. So the first one I'm going to talk about, and this might seem kind of backwards, but I kind of wanted to start with this because I'm not really going much into this, but the fully mature adult. Of course, what we are all striving to become is the fully mature adult and overcomer. But do we have any fully mature adults in the house? Okay, so no, but we have examples, right? Jesus being the forerunner. So what does a fully mature adult look like? This is our goal. A fully mature Christian is one who is so fully resting in Christ that there is no action or idea that is not motivated by the mind of Christ. So having the mind of Christ, like it says in Philippians 2:15. Thinking and acting in harmony with the obedience of Christ. 2 Corinthians 10:5, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of God. The fully mature Christian is one that is talked about in Revelations 3:12 when it says, him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God. So that's what we're striving to be. But I want to concentrate on where we are and what we do have and the different stages in our church of maturity that we have the opportunity and the honor to work with. Who we are now is not who we are called to be, but we have been called to a higher purpose and we have been given the tools to get us there. What we all have in common, though, is that we are all seeking truth and there's only one truth, and that upsets people today. But there is only one, and it's this book, the Bible, that's able to have power over a life and discipline a person's lifestyle to direct a person's thoughts and actions. As we go along, though, we have in our church people of all different ages, experiences, and backgrounds that are coming along with us. And I want to make sure that I say that I'm not just talking about our refugees that have come in, but we have got of all different backgrounds, people who are coming in and at different stages. We have people coming from all different places. Some are children, both naturally and spiritually. And some are adults, not fully mature adults, as we talked about, but adults all the same. I do think we have to be careful not to suppose that because someone just walks through our door that we think that they're a baby. You might be dealing with an adult. And so it takes a little bit of time and relationship to know where a person is in their Christian maturity. I also want to say we can all slip into other stages of maturity. When I'm speaking to the Sunday school here, I feel like I'm speaking to adults in their Christian walk. But we all have times where life overwhelms us and our feelings get the best of us. And that's when we need to come alongside one another with mercy and pray for one another. I think it's a great honor that God has entrusted people to us of these varying stages of maturity. People don't just walk in here from out of nowhere, but God sent them. So we want to handle that task carefully. And always when I give a talk like this, I don't do it with the thought that I know so much about this subject, so I'm going to break it down for all of you. It's something that I've been working on, and as any of you who teach as a class know, you tend to learn more and realize how much you didn't know as you get into the class. I love teaching, though, because I love learning, and then I love to share what I learned. So I'm going to start with newborns and infants. This is, again, Christian maturity. I'm not necessarily talking about actual newborns, but there are a lot of similarities. When I say a newborn, I mean someone with no or maybe just very little Christian experience. So there's a few things I remember vividly about all of my children when they were born. And the first one is that they needed warmth and love right away. And they wanted to be held close. When someone comes into the church, they want to see a smiling face. They need to see that smiling face. We don't know what they've been through and how they've been kicked around by this world, but something brought them here. They didn't just wander in. Something drew them. Maybe they heard that Christians are supposed to be different than what they've experienced in this world. Maybe they remember a grandparent or someone in their past that followed Christ and they had a peace about them. Maybe they heard about this man called Jesus that could change their life. There's something that sparked there, and we don't want to in any way put that fire out. With any amount of coldness on our part, they need warmth and love right away. Now, one thing I have learned about this is that they may not be a hugger. Like, not everyone is a hugger. Found this out the hard way a few times because I am a hugger. Usually I tend to realize it after I've already got them, and I can feel them like stiffening. Yeah, okay, this one's not a hugger. So I have to remind myself, take it easy, a handshake and a smile go a long way. Just welcome them and let them know that they're a part. What we don't want to do is make them feel like they've intruded on what we have going on. If you've ever been made to feel that way, then it's a terrible feeling to feel like you're an outsider. We've had some great examples, though, just recently of how to gently take someone under your wing and be inclusive, but not pushy. We want to include them, but we don't want to push. We don't want to push them in a direction they're not ready for. The other thing I distinctly remember about my newborns is that they were hungry. They needed sustenance of milk right away. Milk is what grows strong bones. It's what is your foundation. They have to be able to do that so that they can get on their feet and not be a bag of jelly. They need it so they can walk. So those foundations are needed, foundational truths of the gospel, who God is, who you are, why you need God, who Christ is, and what that means to you. We have to be careful, though, not to go too deep because they're not ready for it. They're hungry, but they need milk. We want them, though, to taste the goodness of God at this point. Like Psalms 34:8 says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusts in him." And that's really almost what you want to say when you meet a new person. You want to tell them, taste and see. Just come on and see that the Lord is good. He's going to change your life. He's going to do new things for you. Then another thing is with newborns, they're sensitive to change and they startle easily. They don't need heavy changes being put on them at that stage. They can't take it. They need love and a basic foundation. What they need to know is, I'm a sinner. He's a holy God that expects holiness and righteousness, but I can't on my own give him what he expects. I need a Savior, Jesus, who came to earth to show me the way. I have the gospel that Jesus gave to guide me in this life. 1 Peter 2:2-3 says, "As newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word, that ye may grow thereby. If so be, ye have tasted that the Lord is gracious." We want them to taste that, don't we? We want to help them with that hunger. I can't tell you how many times people have said that they came to our church. What it was, they were seeking. They were seeking. They didn't, like I said, just appear here. And I always try to keep that in my mind when I see someone walk in. Something made them come in. Whatever it was, whether it's that they're in such a low place that they needed to come in, or that God has brought them to maybe a high place that they came in, we've got to get to know them, figure out where are you and what is it that you need. And always do it with that smile and that warmth. Another thing about newborns and infants alike is that they can't hold their heads up on their own. They need direction. They need someone to come alongside them and point the way. The best way to do this really is by example. And I always think about Dan's example. He's used it many times of certain things that were so deeply driven into him by his grandparents' example. Specifically, his grandpa would say over and over again, "We don't do this," And no matter where he went in life, even when he left church, it was still inside of him. I don't do that. That's not who I am. And so we need to give those kind of direction to hold their head up, to be that example. They might also need practical help with what to study or how to handle certain situations or relationships or their lifestyle. We'll have to be very careful in how we delve into those things, and also knowing if they really need to make those changes at this stage. They might be jumping ahead. What do they need to know? And also, is this something for me to address with this person, even if they are asking, or do I need to take this to the pastor and let them navigate that with them? And then with babies, they tend to be very self-centered versus self-sacrificial. That's not a criticism of someone at this stage. We wouldn't criticize a baby for being focused on their own needs. I never had any of my babies say to me, "Mom, I can see you're tired. You can come back later." No, they want what they want. They want right now. I need fed, I need warmth. I need to be held. And that's okay. They are needy, and that's the norm at that stage. We will have to lower our expectations when it comes to spiritual babies. They cannot handle heavy correction. We don't want to come down with a heavy hand on them and try to discipline them or criticize them. You don't discipline a baby like that. They can't take it. You lead them, you protect them, you manage their environment so that they don't hurt themselves, but you don't want to hurt them. They are delicate, they're weak, they're frail. So we have to be gentle, we have to be sensitive, we have to pray for wisdom in how to handle them. As they grow into infants, they will begin to transition to soft food, but they're still babes in Christ, as Paul said, 1 Corinthians 3, 1 and 2. They're not able to take meat. If they take doctrine, it has to be what would be called pre-masticated. That's not something we see a lot in our culture. We have baby food or puree food ourselves that we do in a processor, but in Bible days, women would actually chew up the food and then feed it to the baby. I know that sounds really gross, but but that's what they did. And they did it because the baby needed more nutrition, but they were not able to handle meat at that point. But possibly doctrine that is at the bottom shelf level can be given, consumed with a lot of liquid, the Spirit. So a baby at this point is beginning to discover all their senses. The Spirit brings these to life. Let them enjoy what they're sensing. Don't push, but at the same time appreciate the Spirit that they're feeling. We had a little girl here. Her name was Gloria. She would come down front and she would feel something. She didn't know what to do with it, but she'd go around hugging everybody, because she could feel love. She felt that Spirit and she didn't know what to do with it. So she's just hugging everyone. I thought, isn't that precious? She has to get it out somehow. Our children that come down and dance, that's them feeling that. They're sensing what's going on here. My grandfather, when he was very young in the Lord, he had gone to church, but then he had left as a teenager, and he just didn't really get very deep at that point. But he tells a story about how he came back to the Lord. He and a boy got a job on a boat. Another boy, they were probably 14, 15 years old. They got a job on this boat, loading or unloading. I don't know what they were doing, but they were singing. This was a popular song at the time, "You Are My Sunshine." And they were singing this song, But he said somewhere in the middle of singing that, his thoughts turned to the Lord. And he started singing it to the Lord. And so it's always meant something to us, that song. But that was him at that stage. That is something that he caught on to. And we would never want to belittle anything like that, but we want to really encourage things like that. Those little feelings that they're feeling, they're sensing something. It's precious. and appreciate what they're beginning to experience. They are seeing that their faith can move mountains in their life. The mountain of sin that we've talked about that may be in a spiritual newborn's life. Again, we're not necessarily talking about children here. Sometimes these are adults that are newborns. It's being moved into the sea, isn't it? It's that faith that's just the size of a mustard seed that can do all of that. But remember, it's just a seed at that point. A seed is meant to grow. And it's amazing that just that little seed can do that much. And that's monumentous in their life. That's huge in their life, that seed is beginning to grow like that. And it's going to just keep growing. If a spiritual baby is handled correctly, they will feel nurtured and loved. Nurture and love develop trust and security. So then the next stage is a toddler and a child. And it's at this stage that we see people who are beginning to eat solid food and chew it on their own. And I can still remember when my children started doing this, and we still tease Hallie about this. When she was little, we were in bed, and I heard her get up. And she had on those pajamas that have the feet, So I could hear her going down the hall, click, 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 click. And so I thought, what is she doing? Because it was really late at night. And so I started following her. She's probably only like 2, maybe. I can hear her whispering to herself. She was saying, hungry, 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 hungry. She was hungry, like she was heading to the refrigerator and telling herself, hungry, hungry, hungry. And she opens the refrigerator. You know how they do? They get up inside the refrigerator. They're looking, But I had to help her along to find what it is that she actually could eat. We were not going to make a full meal at that point. This is kind of where they are at this stage. They're hungry, and they're ready to go find the food, right? They're taking hold and understanding concepts that they didn't before. And this is at this point, too, where we start to see language develop. So in the Bible, we see the term conversation mentioned. It's our lifestyle. That's what is happening to a person spiritually at this stage. They are beginning to take in solid food and chew on it with deeper concepts, deeper doctrine. Their eyes are opening to what God wants and expects from them, what their lifestyle should look like. They're seeing, and we see this start to manifest itself in their character and the way that they talk and the actions that they take, just like we see language develop in a toddler. They also, at this point, begin to stand and move independently. And I actually had a dream about this. I haven't told this here. I think I told it in Mansfield. But I had a dream one time that I went to a meeting and I was taking notes. And this was very normal of Sister Cindy and I. We loved to take notes and then we would share them with one another, especially after a meeting. We just really appreciated our notes. But in the dream, I took notes and then she and I went to the foyer and we were sharing our notes. And we were so excited and we were reading these notes. And on the page was a little cartoon person, just a simple cartoon man. And he was down in the gutter. And as I was reading these notes, he began to stand up on his feet, this cartoon person, and brushed himself off, and he began to walk. And it was like I was seeing a demonstration of what these notes could do in a life as they're given out. And that's what you see with these toddlers at this stage. They're standing and they're beginning to move independently on their own. They can get up now on those bones. They have that milk. They've had that foundation of Jesus Christ, and they begin to move into that abundant life that can be theirs. Psalms 34, 4-8 says, I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears. They looked into him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. And this is what makes me think of that man I saw in that dream. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him. And he saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around about them that fear him and deliver them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusts in him. Another thing that toddlers do at this point, and children, as we move into children as well, they ask a lot of questions, just like a child does about everything. And you don't always have the answers. This is where, as we mature as adults, we have to be able to say, I don't know, but I'll pray about it. Or I don't know, but there may be someone who does. We had a teacher in school, and I really appreciated this about him. If he didn't have the answer, he had on the blackboard a corner, and he had written like a car there. and he called it the parking lot. And that's where he would put questions that he didn't know the answer to, but he would try to find them for you. And I thought that was, to me, a very mature thing to do, for him to be able to say, I don't know, but let's see if we can figure it out. He never told me, because I said so, or don't ask questions or anything like that. We need to be able to give an understanding of why we do certain things. But at this stage, it will still need to be presented in a down-to-earth way. Some things will still just be too heavy. I heard a great story by Corrie ten Boom. She said that she was with her dad. They were on a train going somewhere, and she was reading something, and she came across a word that she did not understand, and it was a pretty heavy word about a lifestyle. And so she said, "What is this?" And he just sat there for a while. He didn't say anything. And then he said to her, "Pick up my suitcase. We're getting ready to get off the train." And she said, "I can't. It's too heavy." And he said, "So is the question that you asked me. I can't give you the answer right now. It's too heavy for you to carry. But someday we'll come back to it and I'll give you the answer then." She said she really appreciated that. It was too much for her little mind to take in. But someday, as we grow, we can answer those questions. Children at this stage need a lot of attention. My kids especially, when they were little, I would hear them say, "Mama, mama, mama, mama," they want your attention. And I even had one who would take hold of my face and actually turn it towards them. And honestly, it's sad for me to say that, because maybe I wasn't being as attentive as I should have been. People at this stage, though, are going to be needy. They're going to want to share a lot with you. Things are going to be a big deal. And that's okay, because we're going to develop patience in that way. Parental discipline is also introduced as a toddler and then established as a child. These are the laws of God being introduced. The heart of it all being the two laws of love, loving God and loving your neighbor. This is what helps us to grow up, stand on our own, appreciate the boundaries of God, and why at times God chastises us because he loves us. These are God's laws, but they are introduced and established through the minister, through a mentor, through a parent or a grandparent, depending on their age. Again, this is not age specific. You can have a 9-year-old child, or you might have a 90-year-old child in the church. Boundaries, especially external boundaries, are not going to be appreciated at this stage. Again, this is why we have to be able to give an answer for the external boundaries that we keep. There ought to be a reason for why we do the things we do. What is the principle behind it? What is the heart of the matter? Remember that at this stage, they aren't there yet. We're just going to have to bear with them as they go through these things and be able to give answers. Again, not just talking about children or teenagers, but anyone of any age during this stage. Also at this stage, emotions tend to run high. My grandparents were so good at being calm but firm in dealing with me when maybe I was a bit emotional. The difference was my emotions were my engine. They were what was driving me, but they had matured to the point where their faith was their engine. They still had emotions, we all do, but they had put them in the caboose. And that's what I needed to be able to do. And then also with emotions at that stage, responses are not always in proportion to the circumstances. Everything might be a really big deal, even though it's really not a big deal. And so that's where we have to kind of keep ourselves level. Is this really urgent? Is this really a crisis? And then the next stage is youth. This is a very exciting stage in spiritual maturity, because it's here that we really start to see some big changes. But it's also a critical and precarious time, because there are pitfalls at this stage. A person at this stage begins to make their own choices and can make the wrong ones here if they're not careful. So a person at this stage begins to choose their own food. We see them taking it upon themselves to search things out and study. Still lots of questions, but the questions are becoming deeper. At this stage, though, they can also develop a taste for things that are unhealthy. So false doctrine could be introduced. That's why we should encourage any questions and conversation. We have to be careful not to think that just because someone's going along with the program that they're set. It's kind of like the teacher who, loves the kid who's quiet. That doesn't necessarily mean they're a good kid. They're just being quiet, but that's not the goal. It's just to have someone who doesn't make waves or makes life easier for us. This is about a soul, and we want them to have this for themselves. They need an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing and why they believe what they believe. If they can so easily go along with our program, then they could just as easily be led down the primrose path of another program. It has to penetrate to the heart. Growth has to take place internally in order for externals to begin to show up of one's own accord. Ephesians 4:14 through 15 is what we're looking for them to be, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lay in wait to deceive, but speaking the truth in love, may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. At the youth stage, spiritual concepts are being tested and tried. They no longer blindly accept, but they have to commit to it for themselves. All young people go through this, where they ask themselves, do I really believe this? Do I really want to commit to this as my life? It's a horrible thing for us to have to go through, especially as parents. We kind of hold our breath and we pray that they will come through it and make the right choices, but it has to happen in order for them to move from outside of your covering as the parent, the mentor, the pastor, whatever your role is with them, to their own faith and their own commitment. Before I had children, I was the greatest parent that had ever been, right? I mean, I think we all were in our minds. Because we just thought, I just say this, and then they just do this. But that is so not, because there's a will there, isn't there? There's a mind. They've got these whole own ideas and experiences, and so it is not that way. Also at this stage, they are gaining adult levels of strength, but not yet wisdom. So at this stage, we can give a person responsibilities in the church that take strength, that take energy, and thank God for that. I can't tell you how many times here and in Mansfield we've relied on people, maybe due to their young age or just due to their physical strength, to do jobs that our older folks couldn't do. However, they aren't yet at the point where they can be given a job that would require wisdom, that would require a person who could give counsel. That's not where they are, but it's a good thing to work and start allowing them to shoulder some responsibility. It's up to us, though, to be considerate of what they can actually carry, to praise them for what they are able to do. It's not false praise, because we need them. We have to realize that they may not do everything perfectly, though, but in their own mind, they may be doing the best possible job. And I can remember driving with my grandpa, learning how to drive, and we took off. I thought I was doing great. I'm like, I'm driving, this is awesome. And he didn't say a word the whole time, so I thought, I must be good. So then we pulled back in to the driveway, and I said, what did you think? And he said, I ain't never been on a ride like that in my whole life. So I'm like, oh no. So I knew that was not the greatest, but in my mind, it was good. So again, the youth stage is an exciting one, but we don't want people to stay at this stage. Holding people at this stage where you're dictating the externals for them, where there isn't a desire to internally change, is not going to allow growth into fully developed adults. Moving out of this stage, we want fear of God to become awe. We need to move on from, Brother Baer referenced the other day, the carrot stick, the reward punishment mentality. They have to know him to be able to say, the longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows. And then moving into the adult phase. Again, not fully mature adults, but adults. Adults are ones that can not only choose their own food, but they are able to feed others. They are firmly planted, being able to stand on a firm foundation that they have tested and found unshakable. They are the ones who, when a crisis arises, they don't inflame the problem. They tend to be the best listeners, the least flappable, and when they speak, you lean in because you know that wisdom is present. Whenever we were in Mansfield, if Brother Lee got up to talk, I was leaning in. I had pen and paper ready to write down what was he going to say. The best example I've ever seen of a mature adult was at a camp meeting. This has been years ago, and I wasn't actually there. I was watching it on a live stream, but there was a man that got up, and he wasn't familiar with us. He wasn't really familiar with our body of people, and he was just talking, probably just giving what he would usually give to a church, but he started to rail, You could feel the congregation getting really tense, like this person is telling us things that he shouldn't be telling us. He's talking to us in a way that he should not be talking to us. And finally, he sat down, and you're thinking, well, what are we going to do now? It's one of those times in the service. And the best possible person who could get up, and it has to be the right person to get up at a time like that, was Brother Sturgeon. And he got up and he started to just tell a story. And you think, what is this? We just sat through this, and clearly people are thinking this should be addressed, But he said, one time I was at the airport and I was waiting for my plane with some other people. And this man came through, and he was trying to catch a plane, and he had all these bags, and he is just running. He said he is going as fast as he can down this airport. And he said, and I'm watching this, and what he doesn't realize is there was a glass wall. And he said, and that man hit that glass wall. He said he hit that thing so hard, everything went everywhere. And he was just stunned. He said, and do you think that we all said, you idiot? Didn't you see that glass wall? What are you doing? No. He said, you know what we did? We came over, we helped him get his things together, we handed him his bags, and we got him on his way. And that was it. But we all got it. Unflappable. Just let it go. It's okay. You're going to be all right. And that was Christian maturity. That was an adult. As we mature into adults, our mentor's direction becomes counsel more than command. A mature person is teachable and appreciates counsel when it comes from a loving source. And then we begin to mentor from that same place of love, oftentimes having to use ourselves as the example of what not to do. And I think this is another sign of maturity. We see it in 1 Corinthians 13, the mature way that Paul teaches about love. He could easily say, if you speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and if you don't have charity, then you are a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. But he doesn't say that. He says, if I speak with the tongues of angels and I don't have charity, then I am as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. The best leaders don't say charge. They don't tell you to go in. They say, follow me. Jesus, as we say, sometimes he's called that fourth man in the fire, but I loved it when Brother Isaac Aka said he was the first man in that fire. He was already there. Before you got in there, he was already there. So they say, follow me, and in our case, it's follow me as I follow Christ. There is an internal self-discipline rather than external controls of a mature adult. This doesn't mean that disciplines and boundaries are done away with, but for an adult, boundaries are comfortable in their security. A spiritual adult knows barriers between them and temptation and sin are walls of protection for their soul. They become like gravity, so you get to the place where you don't even think about them anymore. You don't feel their constraints, but they hold you in place, just like gravity does. The reason for this is because your reasons for what you do are firmly anchored in your beliefs. You have stability in those. You don't have to constantly question in your mind. Psalms 37 talks about the mature man, and it says in verses 30 through 31, the mouth of the righteous speaketh wisdom, and his tongue talketh of judgment. The law of his God is in his heart. None of his steps shall slide. Childish ways are put aside at this point, like it says in 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man or a grown woman, I put away childish things. We may have times, again, I said in the beginning, where we slip back, our emotions get the best of us, but then we have to get back up and say, I'm sorry, and go on putting away our childishness. There are going to be times, of course, as adults where we go through our own crises, and at these times, we are going to need others' assistance. Thank God, at times like these, we have other adults who come alongside of us and lift up our arms, and we have seen examples of that recently. But those times cause growth as well. We can look in that mirror in 1 Corinthians 13:12, and we can see growth. And the interesting thing about growing spiritually is that we are seeing ourselves grow, but as we look up to God, we become smaller and smaller. It's a strange thing to grow, and yet you become smaller and smaller because He's becoming bigger and bigger. That's just how big He is. The more we grow small, the bigger He is, and that's the goal.